like to welcome everyone today. It's March the 1st and we're here at the Independence Public Library. We have a really special guest today. This is Mr. Robert Wesley, and he's here as part of a series of interviews that we're doing over the course of the next year to heighten awareness and raise the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in independence or with ties to independence. So, Mr. Wesley, I can't imagine anyone doesn't know you here in Independence, but I wondered if you would state your name and just tell us a little bit of your background.
We'll try. I'm Robert. My middle initial is A, stands for Augustus.
Ah.
That was my grandfather. And I've carried that with me for the number of years that I've been here. From the beginning of time is the way I look at it. I was the youngest in our family. I was the youngest person in the family.
How many children were there?
There was 8 of us, but now all are gone with the exception of. But I was the baby of the group. And of course that happened before the Depression. And
can I ask how old you are?
I'm 91. And I can tell you no more about independence than what we've lived for that many years. Subsequently, it is history by itself, because so many things that's happened in here in Independence.
You were born here?
I was born on Cement Street. That's
Okay.
where I was born, and that was leading the community to independence was the cement plant. Mm-hmm. They did lots of things. Old-time things that folks did, and independence grew from that, really. Mm-hmm. Aganippy Park was where I was born, in Aganippy Park. And people have a problem even now, even calling the name of Aganippy.
I wondered how that was pronounced. I've heard it before, but I never knew how to say it.
That's how they got the name. They didn't know how to spell it, so they spelled it themselves. That was a good thing during that day. Mm-hmm. So my name is, as I said, Robert Wesley, and I was born in 1929, and the youngest of, at the time, 8 children. Uh-huh. So
did you go to school here in Independence?
Everything I did was in Independence. Uh-huh.
High school?
Everything. When I went to school, you know, we did things that as the schools were being built. You know, junior high school was a big thing for Independence, even during that time.
Were the schools segregated here at one point in time?
I've been asked that many times. We didn't have, during that time, there wasn't nearly as much publicity for print as we become accustomed to. Uh-huh. You just didn't, you knew about the Independence Daily Reporter, and that's the way you took everything from that concept. Nothing more, just that. But that's all we had. Uh-huh. And that was the difference in talking about it, because what else would you do with something? I remember when the library that was really a big news item. Mm-hmm. The library was a big thing. And of course, the women had a lot to do with
yes, they did.
The library.
Uh-huh.
You see, it's always been that way.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people ask me questions about that. it's that's what we always thought about. Public library.
Uh-huh.
That's where we got the news. That's what it was about, and we lived with that. Subsequently, our knowledge is basically what someone has told me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have nothing to add to that because you grew up with that.
Uh-huh.
I grew up with it. The older people, they knew the things that we thought we'd learn,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I am even today. You know, I've watched some things grow. It's brand new,
Uh-huh.
but it's news to everyone who sees it,
Uh-huh.
and that's a good thing. That's why when I was even asked to do this particular program, it's all brand new.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, and some things that I've learned. My oldest sister, who is not with us now, but she was one of the first graduates of college
Uh-huh.
in Independence.
What was her name?
Her name was Ernestine Parks. And Ernie was smart, really, so there's no problem about that. She was always, you just looked at her and knew that she knew something.
Mm-hmm. Were you readers? Were you children readers growing up?
I think we were,
Did you come to the library?
no.
No?
That was a faraway thing almost to us. Why didn't we do that? People just didn't do it. The library was kind of out of touch
Okay.
with what we were doing. And I lived, as I said, in Aganepi Park, which was southeast Independence.
Mm-hmm.
And people were just people. Streets were not paved. We didn't have such a thing as that in that area. And so we watched all that stuff grow. And so even now, I think about it, before streets were paved, you know, what did you do? I don't know what we did. We just didn't, we didn't think about it.
Uh-huh.
We just did what we did. And there were no cars and things bothering us.
Right,
You know,
right.
we didn't have all those things. So it's all brand new. And even now, as I think of it, it's good to think about, because we think about things that foreign to people
Uh-huh.
just because it's brand new.
Right.
And that's what it was to us then. As
You've
I
seen
said, streets were not paved, and so we watched streets begin to be paved. People had a lot of bricks
Yes.
in their mind because that's all we ever saw.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of the streets in Independence was named after some of the bricks that we were talking about.
Uh-huh.
I can remember the Sherwood Construction Company was a big thing to Independence then, and of course over the years, the Sherwoods were friends of mine because I grew up with them.
Uh-huh.
You know, and so I knew what they were doing, and it was foreign to me because you just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned from the Sherwoods a lot of things. Leon Sherwood became one of my best friends in life because he started me out doing things that he just thought I ought to know.
Uh-huh.
And it proved helpful to me personally. And so I learned from Leon that he was just a human being just like I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did things like that. And we disagreed on a lot of things too. You know, we didn't start out doing everything perfectly. We disagreed on a lot of things because he thought there was just some things I just shouldn't focus my mind on. Just leave that alone because you can't do that.
Huh.
So I just finally grew up to the place where I'd ask him, who are you to tell me what I can't do?
That's awesome.
You know, what do you think about, what about that's coming from? And his relatives, his kids were the same way. They knew that they were better than we were. Speaking of color, they knew that they were better than, it was no problem. It was factual. And one thing that I learned early on, and that's been a lot of years ago, I don't know why you think you're better than me.
I was going to ask you how you felt about that.
You know, why do you think you're better than I am? I don't know why I'm the color I am. I don't question that. I never have, and I don't even now. I don't question the reason that I'm this color. That was God done, not mine. And so what we're saying is, whoever gives you the idea that you're better than me, I question that as I do today. When you think you're better than I am, we're in a different world because you're not better than me.
Have you seen attitudes change at all?
Oh, I've seen a lot of attitudes change. You know, I have learned things that change.
For the better?
For the better, of course. It's really been for the better. One of the things that I believe in, and that is things that are God ordained, we cannot change. And I just haven't ever had that as one of my problems, because God is the creator of all of our things.
Yes.
And those of us who are not aware of that, I would hope this program would help them in that effort, because God is the creator of this thing. And we are not here to, we're not inventing anything, because in the first place, in the beginning was God, and the God was there. So we don't have to worry about that.
That's a fact. So,
you know, it's always it's for us. So that's part of the reason that I agreed to do this, is because of over the time that I've been here, there's always been a need to do some things. And we have been a part of some of the change over things that have happened in Independence, at least for the last 91 years. And so we're glad of that. I think that one of the programs that I was a part of for not quite 20 years, but we did it for 17 years, Reflections, the show. And our show did things that invented for us where we really are, what we do. And during those years of the Reflections, we talked to a lot of people, which we did on the Reflection show, that made Independence even more available to people coming and going. And we enjoyed that.
We missed that.
We've seen lots of people, even now, for instance, the Attorney General, for instance, I knew when he was born. And
Derek Schmidt.
Derek, I knew when he was born. I knew, you know, his grandfather. I knew his grandfather very well. But Derek is a person that I know now very well, because I've been involved in the state affairs for a lot of years, and Derek has been a part of all of that for me, because I knew Derek's parents. And so many things that have happened in my life, it's been contributory to what we're doing even today. There were things people said you can't do. I always had a problem with that. Why can't you do it? You know, why can't I do that? Nelson Rupert, who was the owner of KIND here for so many years, Nels told me one day he wanted to make an announcer out of me. And that was before time, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I could do that. And we really did that. We had a show on KIND that started out from nothing, and we made it into something.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Fisher, who I watched when he was born, I
Uh-huh.
knew his parents. Jim had infantile paralysis that was, we didn't know what it was.
He was the first baby and first child in Independence to contract polio.
Yes.
Yep.
And he just grew with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I laugh and I talk with Jim about that now because Jim has been very, very helpful, even those who had medical problems.
Uh-huh.
He just made it look easy.
Right. He did this, I think, the same attitude
Yes.
that you have. Instead of, people would tell him he couldn't do
Yep,
something, and
yep.
he would say, well, why not?
Yeah.
Yes. So,
And we look at that, and that is what made things work. So what we do even now is find ways to take care of things like that.
mm-hmm.
I belong to the Independence Rotary Club, and in that club we have done so many things for infantile paralysis that nationally, worldwide, we've done those things. And those are things that we are a part of, believe it or not, in our contributions to make things work. That's a part of that. We've watched people, even in Independence, grow from infantile paralysis, people who were in wheelchairs, made things work. One of the people who was just famous for that was Charles Stewart, who was an insurance agent here in Independence for years. Charles was in a wheelchair, and I watched things happen for him he lived on Sycamore Street, and it just happened that I happened to be the mail carrier on Sycamore Street during those times when there were no such thing as black mail carriers. And so I was on Sycamore Street, but I knew Charles Stewart. And so that was the difference between not knowing and then knowing about people. We learn those things because people inherently do things that we don't think people can do. And we found that happen to us in our career. The people that were a part of the public library, some of those people were old-time school teachers.
Yes.
I can remember Mary Self, who was the person that you hear about from Bill Inge. I knew Mary Self very well because she was a study hall teacher, and we were always in trouble, getting in trouble with her because she was a teacher.
Did you know William Inge?
Oh yes, I did. I knew Bill. I didn't. He wasn't known about anything, but the school teacher that I had, he also had. And even then, what we learned about that was, the people who, during those days, the bankers and all those people who were in charge of things, those are the people that grew up during the time of Bill Inge. Bill Inge was a student like anybody else, but Mary Self and at the librarian at that time, Pearl Russell, was the person who really guided Bill Inge, because Bill Inge was, as I said, a student just like all the rest of the people. And Pearl and Mary Self, those were people who really watched and made him grow. It was a good time, really, because the school systems were learning like we were learning, and we found that if we pay attention to that, we can grow from that. And I think many of us have grown from knowledge of some of those people, such as Mary Self, and Grace Crocker, who was one of our English teachers. She was a very, very knowledgeable person, but she was very, very aware of all of the students as we grew. It made us feel like we were doing something. And it was helpful to us.
Well, there's a book that you've brought with you today I was going to ask you about.
This book that I selected was a part of my life for the last 10 years.
And it inspires you.
And it inspired me to see exactly what could happen. You see, I was a person who, as I said, believed in what we see here.
You want to hold that book up so we can all see?
Obama was one of the people that, as I said, was instrumental in my life.
Let's turn it around
because
that way.
He and his family contributed so much to our country over the last 10 years. He was the first African American president of the United States. I was the first American person of independence that was ever hired by the system of independence to be a part of independence physically, morally, and publicly. First, I was the first person who was elected to an office by the county of Montgomery. Over the years of my life, I was the first. I knew lots of people who were contributors to what I did, but they were not accepted. There's a difference in being accepted and being refused. We've learned some of those things. Obama was one of my choices because he and his family did things that people said you couldn't do. And one of his cliches was, "Yes, we can." I think that even in conversation, it makes a lot of us think about some of those things that we can do as opposed to we cannot do. I think that one of the things that my reflection show did through Mike Flood and his company, we started some things that people had said, you can't do that. But we showed people that we can. And we did that for 17 years. Through independence itself, we made things happen. My family, we have friends even now that I made during that time of what we were doing, brought some of the people to independence. It made a change in independence because people had seen that we made things happen.
Yes, you
That's
did.
what it was all about. You know, I think about Derek Schmidt, who is the Attorney General of the state of Kansas. His parents were good friends of mine because we made things happen in independence that said you can't do that. We made that happen. Obama was one of the people that I watched grow. And being he president of the United States for 8 years, he proved that it's real to do these things that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. That's what the country's all about. And so we see that, and this is what this book is about, Obama and his family and his background. The person who wrote the book, Pete Souza, mm-hmm. he is the person who really made Obama stand out because of his thoughts about Obama. Uh-huh. And that's what I like about this book.
Did you want to share something from that book?
I would like to do that. When this book was being thought of, Pete Souza, who the originator of this book, he said, and this is his wording, not mine, this is a definitive visual biography of Barack Obama's historic presidency, captured in the unprecedented detail by his White House photographer. Pete, in moments of his own, said, and I quote, Obama's first full 2 terms, Pete was with the president during the more crucial moments than anyone else. In other words, he knew what to do and mm-hmm. how to do it. I even laugh when I read this book about his mother, whom he really does. He visualized how she was mm-hmm. and how he made things work because of her. Interestingly, you read things like this, which has made me a person who wanted to read more about that. And so that's what made me look at this book the way uh-huh. I do. It has the 8 years that Obama was president of the United States. Is that good news? Yes, it is. It's historic news? Yes, it is. I've seen so many things like that happen in my life that I didn't think would happen. Mm-hmm. But it proved that it did happen, and there was nothing that I could do about that. Mm-hmm. But it was happening. Those were good things, and that's what makes our country the way it is even now. Of course, there's dissidents, but there's always been that. Mm-hmm. Even when our Lord was here, in the beginning was God, mm-hmm. and He went up to these things that we're in right now. He couldn't stop it, because that's what we do. We do the wrong thing most of the time, and we get forgiveness for that through God, who allows us to do these things. That's what my book came from, and that's what Obama's life came from. So I appreciate the fact that the library is even now a part of what we're trying to put into place right now because of the events of what's going on with us right now. Mm-hmm. Is that a good thing? Of course it is. Because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that's why we can do it. It's all good things. And we should be proud of that one fact ourselves. The result is a portrait of exceptional intimacy and a stunning record of a landmark era in American history. That's what this book is about. And that's what our life, I hope, is about, that we can talk about throughout this book and on because of this book. it makes things like this happen. And we can just go through page after page after page and find something new about what Barack Obama stood for and why we're doing these things right now.
Right.
It's because it's something he stood for, they stood for, we stand for. Is there anything wrong with that? No, there's not.
Was there a particular story in the book that you really liked or that stood out?
I do. I tell you, in the book itself, we see so many good things that Obama stood for. Just the little youngster that he wanted to rub Obama's hair. He wanted to do that, and I laughed about that when I first saw it, because even Obama had to laugh about it, because this is what a child had seen. But he could see it, and it was real to him because Obama was real. He was not a fixation, he was real. And the little boy was really, he was enthused about it, and so was the president.
He was genuine.
Yes, yes. And you know, even that's one of the things that we learned from this book of Susa, that little people see things that we don't see. You know, they learn things from us that we're not aware of, but it does happen. Page after page after page.
If I asked you if there was a person in your life who has inspired you or impacted you in a positive way, would that be Barack Obama?
It would be
or
Barack
would there
Obama.
be? Is there someone else from earlier years?
There's some people who in my own family that caused me to feel the way that I feel. As I said to you earlier, my sister was a college graduate. And during those days, not only was that unusual, but it was unexpected.
Yes.
You know, people just didn't think about people in colleges and so forth. But in my family, we had hair dressers, we called them, even during those places. During those days, it was my grandparents who were doing some of those things, such as hair and all this type of thing. People didn't, we had no idea what they were doing, but they did it, and we expected that of them. Is that what goes on now? Yes, it is. We see people right now in production of doing things with hair. How can you think about that? Because we had people in our family that did things like that. And we learned from those things that you can do some of the things we're talking about even now. Can we do it? Yes, we can. And that's part of what Obama's life was about. And yes, we can. And it was one of the things that he took into the presidency for 8 years' time, and still going on today, because people will inherently take on what people train them to do. And we see that happening so much. I've seen that happen even now.
Is there another story in the book that you recall that stood out to you?
Here, right here on one of the figures here of his two girls, his two children, they learned that their dad was just a normal individual like anybody else, but they had fun. It was a good thing because President Obama had attitudes that was unexpected. People did things, even in this book, that thousands of people, And I laugh about that even now, because during some of the times before Obama's time, I lived in Washington, D.C.
Did you?
with my sister, who worked for the federal government. And I lived there a lot of summers that I went to Washington, D.C., that people didn't, at that time, they didn't do it because, number one, we didn't have jets and so forth that we have now. We learned all that as we went along, you know, and so we learned, we flew to Washington, D.C. in the summer because my sister lived there. And so we went there and learned from that place. And I worked out of Baltimore many years of summers that I'd go to Washington. I was there when President Truman was there.
Wow.
I was in Washington when VJ Day happened. I was in Washington, you know. That was unusual also, because here I was from Independence, Kansas, and I was in Washington, D.C., that's where my sister was, and we just took it on the way we saw it. Those things happen in our lives that are hard to think about not happening. It's like Ralph Mitchell of Independence. It's hard not to think about independence without thinking about Ralph Mitchell. It just wasn't. So now we're seeing lots of those things happen. The same thing with Barack Obama. We're seeing things happen here that thousands of people in this book. The little boy who rubbed his hair, and that was a real picture.
This particular picture here.
And that was a picture. You just can't believe a little boy seeing that, but yet he saw it, and he saw the president of the United States doing that. And what can you do about things like that? You know that it was real. You know that was real. Are we going to grow from that? I think we will. I think because that has happened, we see things can happen. And if we can be a part of those things, isn't that what we're here for? You know, excuse not wanting to do, but accept doing to want to do.
Right.
That little boy was a very, very good example for me when I saw here's a little boy, and I think about my own children. They saw lots of those things happen. And I think that we can do what we see happening because it does really happen. It's not a dream, it's a fact. It does really happen. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. That would be, I was going to ask you for additional thoughts or things that you'd like to pass on. And it sounds to me like there were two things I've heard you say. One is instead of saying, I can't, ask, why not?
Yep.
And the second is, yes, we can,
Yes, we can.
which they're kind of the same thing.
It really is. And that is really one of the things that I would like to continue to say. That's why we're here. You know, we're here because God has allowed us. And one of the things that in my life that has been contributory to all of the things that I've done, really, I had a talent, God-given talent, that I learned how to sing a song.
Wow.
And over the years of my life, that has been a contributor to all the things that I've done, physically, mentally, spiritually, and all those things. I had a talent. And you know, once you are given something to do, it's our obligation to do what's given to us to do.
To use your talent.
And so we do that. And we've done that for 50 years or more. We've been in a lot of families during their time of need because we had a talent that contributed to their homegoing of many of their families. We were there. Wasn't anything that I built, it was a thing that I was given. And you know, I've enjoyed every moment of those things in my life because it was contributory to people in their need, and I was there.
So, how would you like to be remembered someday in the distant future, I hope? How would you like people to remember Robert Wesley?
I think the first thing they could say about Robert Wesley was he could sing a song. And you know that over the years, that has been the thing that allowed me to do many of those things. I've done that in this country, and I've done that outside of the country. I've met people who were very, very famous people in this country and outside of the country as well, came to independence. I met one of the largest orchestra leaders of our time. I met during my lifetime in this military service. He was one of my best friends, but he was an organizer, a builder, and the whole 9 yards. And it's just something that you don't forget those things.
What was his name?
His name was Foster, Frank Foster. And Frank and I were in military school together, but we met in the service, and he was one of the owners of the Count Basie Orchestra, brought that orchestra to independence. Frank and I we had many, many dreams about some of those things, but he was a big timer, and I learned that he's normal just like me. Yes, you can. Because not only is the God the creator of that, he's the creator of us. And so we can do things because we have that already built in for us. And you know, to me, that is one of the best things that I could ever say to this program even, that it's the best thing that ever happened to me, is believing who I am, what I'm here for. That's why I'm here. And would I like to be remembered like that? I would, for that. I could say yes to that, because I couldn't add to that even if I wanted to. I couldn't, because these are the things that the Obamas did that, and he was president for 8 years. His family grew up in the White House. Even during the time of turmoil, they were there. They really did some good things. They were still there. Maybe you didn't vote for them, but they were still there. They were acknowledged. They were welcomed. They were doing things that we all need to do.
And maybe what we found was we're all more alike than we are different.
Exactly. And I think we found that.
I hope so.
We've done some things that was contributory to what they have done. And I'm really appreciative of that. You know, some of the people that as I call my friends, even now, I can remember when some of these people were young, very, very young, and they've learned to do so many things for us, even of today. That's what happened. You know, I am concerned about the things we don't do more than I am the things that we are doing. Even I think today that my children are doing some things that we have taught them to do right here in Independence. You know, I've seen people in different categories do things, even in my own life, that God is in charge, whether we want to give him that credit or not.
Mm-hmm.
God is in charge of these things we do. They're worthwhile. I think that we can now say that it's real, because it is real. And I think that we can say the same thing that I said years ago. It is well with my soul. Even now, I don't have to worry about some things that I can't do, but I can really be receiver of the things I can do. And I like that idea.
That sounds like a good note to end on.
It's a good one.
Well, I sure thank you for being here today and sharing with us. It's been a dream of mine. The last time I met you was when Jim Fisher did an interview with you, and that was very memorable as well. But you made my day, made my month, made my year, and I'll always remember today. So I thank you very much, Mr. Wesley.
God bless you for inviting us here.
Thank you.
We're appreciative of that.